So when it came time to choosing a game to review next, I put out on my Twitter, at SSJdavey, and the choices were Castlevania Rondo of Blood or Resident Evil Code Veronica. And by a staggering majority, we're on Rondo of Blood. So let's dive into it. Castlevania Rondo of Blood, first released back in 1993. I've played it as part of the Castlevania Requiem collection, which bundles it with Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the PlayStation 4. I've never played the games before, and just like with all my other reviews, I go unscripted, off the cuff, and kind of talk about my experience, how the game holds up, if I think it's worth your time checking out in 2020. Now let's dive in. I'm not a Castlevania veteran by any means. The only Castlevania I've played before this is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. When I reviewed that, I've always kind of been wondering what classic Castlevania means and what that is, because I know that Symphony of the Night moved away so far from classic Castlevania, really evolving the series. People say that Rondo is really hard and that it's difficult, especially compared to Symphony of the Night. During my time playing this game, I went through the standard grief pattern that people go through when they lose a loved one. So it starts off with the grief itself. As soon as I started playing the game and I realised you're very limited into how you can actually attack, having extremely limited movement compared to Alucard and Symphony of the Night, I really grieved for not being able to play Alucard and not being able to jump about and kind of just source enemies willy-nilly. It's quite funny looking back, because in my Castlevania Symphony of the Night review, I said in there this: I never died to a boss, didn't die to any enemy. Now it's quite funny looking back, because this game kicked the living shit out of me. After I got over the grief of that, I got onto the acceptance stage. So the acceptance stage is where I just realised I've just got to get used to it. I just got to get used to it and just come to accept that this is the game, this is what I'm dealing with. And after that then, it moves into what I'm casually referring to as Dark Souls mode. Now, I've never had a game since my first Soulsborne experience, which was Bloodborne, kick the arse out of me so often, and yet I'm so grateful for it doing that. You really have to get good with this game. There is no two ways about it. This game will treat you like a bitch, and it treated me like a bitch all the way up until the end boss. It forces you to get good. It doesn't let you skate by or cheese your way through stuff. You just got to get good. You just got to learn the enemies that you're up against. The stages that you go on, there's 9 stages in total, with a total of 4 alternative routes that you can go on to make like a separate route to the final boss. And so that's what I call Dark Souls mode, because when I played Bloodborne, I remember I was in the first starting village for hours to meet that first boss. I was not used to how the game played and how you had to change your style. I'm so used to games kind of hand-holding these days that going back into that classic moment of just getting your ass handed to you and just replaying and replaying and replaying a level until you know it like the back of your hand. And this game really reminded me of that. To me, it feels like having that Dark Souls experience that I've longed for since playing Bloodborne, and I've never quite found it. Games like Nioh and other games that are kind of Soulsborne in nature have offered that similar experience, but it's never given me that kind of challenge, and this really, really did. So after that, you move on to the final stage of the grief curve, which is the got good stage. And I didn't actually achieve the got good stage until I completed the game. I completed the game and reran it then with a secondary character that you unlock as part of your journey, I'll go into shortly. Absolutely creamed the entire game. And people say it's harder with that character, but I absolutely cakewalked it at that point, because you know the enemies. You know what they're going to do, you know how they attack, you know their weaknesses, you know what items and sub-weapons you can use to exploit that with. It's just got to the point where you know the game intricately. I haven't had a feeling like that since Bloodborne, and it feels really, really random to compare Castlevania Rondo of Blood to a Soulsborne game. But I'm doing it. I'm absolutely doing it, because it was exactly the same curve that I went on with this game compared to that. Now I'm going to dive kind of into the systems at work here and what you can and can't do and what the overall plot is very shortly. But the first thing we need to cover off is the audio. So Rondo of Blood has a soundtrack which only Big Shaq can do justice. Soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. So much better, leagues ahead of Symphony of the Night, which at the time I really enjoyed the soundtrack. Every single stage has an amazing tune to it. And it's kind of one of the real hooks to kind of keep you playing it, because even though I was getting sourced every single stage, which I'm sure you're seeing from this gameplay, I just kept coming back. The music is just absolutely unforgettable, absolutely fantastic. Then moving on from that, what I didn't realise during my Symphony of the Night review is that so many enemies were taken directly from this game, including the death animations. They're ripped exactly from Rondo. What was quite nice was replaying some of the same locations that you go to during Rondo of Blood, seeing them again. And even though I'd done it in the reverse order, because obviously this game came out in 93 and Symphony of the Night came out in 1997, and it's a direct sequel to Rondo of Blood, it was amazing seeing it all again with a different set of tools at your disposal and different movement options, which obviously change how the level's been designed, and it was really novel. But in terms of the gameplay itself, so the way it works is that you play as Richter Belmont. Richter Belmont's goal is to go rescue his girlfriend, Annette, who's been taken by Dracula, and that's the goal of the game. Real simple. There is not one single level of this game that I walked through on my first time through without retrying at least 4 times. And I know I'm a scrub. I'm a Castlevania newbie. If you've never played a Castlevania before, I would encourage you to start with this. I really would, rather than the Symphony of the Night, because I wish that I'd played this first now, so that I could really appreciate what Symphony of the Night has done for the series, rather than it go the other way round, where now I'm looking back at what they've moved away from. Now, the game itself, your normal weapon is a whip, which then you can jump with, you can stand with, and you can crouch with, and attack enemies around. Now, there are some little hidden techniques, just like with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It wasn't until I was kind of just mashing on the pad in Symphony of the Night that I realised that you could do all these extra movement options with Alucard that I didn't know about. Like pressing down up X, for example, with Alucard in Symphony of the Night, you'd do like a super jump. And that kind of stuff is in this. If you use your whip and then you double tap forwards straight after pressing it, it will slightly extend the hitbox on the whip, and it's kind of just trial and error, and I was looking for it from the moment the game started because of playing Symphony of the Night. But I can imagine how novel that must have felt at the time to be able to have these little intricacies built in, and you don't get any other weapons apart from that. Now, what you get to give you some extra tools is you get sub-weapons. So sub-weapons run on hearts, which you pick up through killing enemies or destroying lamps and different objects around the environment. Each weapon then, which ranges from like a cross to holy water, there's 6 in total. They each have their own heart usage values, so some cost more hearts to use than others. Now, this game I realised was the first one to introduce the sub-weapon ultimate attack, so by pressing upwards and triangle, that will activate like a special attack that weapon has. So for example, with the holy water, it will make it rain holy water, so it damages enemies all within the entire screen, does different ticks of damage on that. And so there comes a lot of strategy then with which weapons to use in which sections of the game, and especially when it comes to bosses, because certain bosses get absolutely sourced by certain sub-weapons, and figuring that out, again, just takes me back to Dark Souls, and takes you back to my Bloodborne experience, and knowing which weapons were the right task for that enemy, and knowing that maybe fire paper would source this werewolf, or knowing that electric paper would source this guy. Figuring that stuff out for myself was absolutely amazing. The game doesn't give you any tips, doesn't give you anything to get you going. You just dive in, you just got to figure it out. And I can see that if you don't enjoy a challenge, you will not enjoy this game. If that's something you're looking for, you will love it. You will absolutely love it. The game, even though it's 9 stages, those 9 stages can be completed in multiple different ways, and there's a lot of hidden secrets, and it kind of encourages you to explore in those limited stages. Kind of just have a play around. The amount of times I just went up to a wall and just smacked a wall, and then I found health items, or I found a secret entrance which would take me to a different area, and it felt really liberating playing it and knowing that I haven't seen everything, that even though it is extremely linear, it's a game of the time. It is just a case of just moving forward and progressing the stage. At the end of every stage is a boss fight, but it might not be the boss that you're intended to go fight first. It might just be a case that you've managed to work your way down into the alternate area. So finishing the game and then seeing the path I took was really eye-opening, because I thought I'd kind of seen everything, and then replaying it for my second time through and realising, oh no, there's an entirely different way to Dracula's castle that I haven't seen before, was really liberating. And one of the characters you unlock early on in the game is called Maria Renard. Now, Maria is a little girl who you meet in Symphony of the Night. She uses animals for her attacks. So she uses like doves for her standard weapons, kind of acting like a short-range cross. But she has very limited health compared to Richter. You're kind of swapping your power for your health. I found it an absolute cakewalk with her. and playing the game through again for a second time with her to do the alternate route was an absolute cakewalk, and I loved every minute of it. Now, I don't know if that's partly because she's broken, or if that's partly because I need the game more. I think it's a combination of the two. There's one thing I need to cover off with the audio. The voice acting is absolutely abysmal. The voice acting is so bad. It is so cheesy and so camp, and it's not in the intentional way that Resident Evil often is.
Death to you. The world is not yours to exist in.
It is not by my own power that I am resurrected. It is the greed of humanity which calls me back.
It's just bad. It's just actually really bad. You could tell it was at that time when games were kind of translated over to the West as a second thought. But terrible voice acting aside, the visual element to it is lovely. The thing about pixel art is it is completely timeless, and that's what this game has on its side. Granted, it doesn't look as pretty as Symphony of the Night, but it's 4 years earlier than that, so I'm not going to hold that against the game at all. Do I think it stands up in 2020? Yes. Yeah, I definitely do. This really stands the test of time. And when you combine that with the audio, and you combine that with the amazing gameplay that you get and the challenge that you get for as a player, this game 100% is worth playing in 2020. Now, where do I think it ranks compared to Symphony of the Night? After I completed this game, and I did everything that was available to me to do, I went back and replayed Symphony of the Night twice. And I went back and played it once, getting the bad ending, not getting the glasses, and then once then playing it through with Richter. And I gotta say, out of the two, the game that I'm going back to more often than not is Rondo. I cannot stop playing Rondo. I've gone back and played it through at least 4 times now, and I can see it being one of those games that if I'm in between titles and I'm looking for something quick to do, just have a quick run through a Rondo. Just because it's just so fun. It's just an absolutely brilliant game from start to finish. Granted, it treats you like a bitch, but being a bitch makes you into a man, and that's why people love Dark Souls. But that's my review, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. As always with the channel, I put a vote up on my Twitter about what the next game I should be reviewing is. Currently, The Last of Us or Resident Evil Code Veronica. I've played The Last of Us before, never played Code Veronica. I love the Resident Evil series. So put a vote on my Twitter at SSJdavey, and let's kind of see what you guys want me to do next. But thank you very much for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.